pays a most dangerous thing in this world is not a person who has never been hurt. The most dangerous thing in this world is a person who has been broken completely and chose to rise anyway. And empaths, more than anyone else on this planet, understand what it means to carry wounds that nobody else can even see. From the very beginning, the empath's life is not easy. They feel everything. Every harsh word lands deeper. Every betrayal cuts further. Every moment of rejection echoes longer inside their chest than it does for anyone else around them. While others shake it off and move forward, the empath sits with the pain, processes it, turns it over in their hands like a stone, and feels every single edge of it. People around them say, "Move on." People around them say, "You are too sensitive." People around them say, "Stop making everything so heavy." But the empath cannot stop. Because that is not a weakness, that is a nervous system that was built to go deeper than the surface. And here is with a hat nobody tells you. Every single wound that an empath absorbs does not disappear. It does not evaporate into the air. It gets stored. It gets cataloged. It gets filed into the most sophisticated emotional database that exists inside a human being. That pain becomes data. That heartbreak becomes intelligence. That moment of betrayal that almost destroyed them at 22 becomes the exact reason they can look someone in the eye at 45 and know without a single word being spoken that this person is not safe. This is not bitterness. Do not confuse the two. Bitterness closes the heart. What happens to the empath who survives their wounds is something entirely different. Their heart stays open, but now it has wisdom guarding the door. They have paid for that wisdom with real suffering, real tears, real nights where they questioned everything about themselves. And that price, that enormous, heavy, personal price, is exactly what makes the knowledge unshakable. You cannot buy this kind of awareness. You cannot read it in a book. You can only earn it by living through the fire and refusing to let the fire define you. There is a version of the empath that most people only ever see: the one who is overwhelmed, the one who walks into a room full of people and within minutes feels like the walls are closing in, the one who comes home completely drained after a simple conversation that barely lasted an hour. The world looks at that version and calls it weakness. The world looks at that version and says this person cannot handle reality. But what the world does not understand is that this is not weakness. This is a nervous system operating at a frequency that most human beings will never even come close to accessing. When an empath is young, their sensitivity has no structure around it. It is raw. It is wide open. Every emotion in the room enters them without permission. Every unspoken tension, every hidden resentment, every fake smile that is covering some thing darker, the empath feels all of it simultaneously, and there is no filter, no gate, no wall to slow it down. It is like having every radio station in the world playing inside your mind at full volume at the exact same time. Of course it is overwhelming. Of course it feels like too much, because it is too much for a system that has not yet learned how to work with what it has been given. But the human nervous system is not static. It learns. It adapts. It reorganizes itself based on experience, based on exposure, based on the patterns it encounters again and again over time. And for the empath, this reorganization is nothing short of extraordinary. Every overwhelming experience they survive teaches their nervous system something critical. Every moment they felt too much and still kept functioning adds another layer of calibration to their internal system. Slowly, without them even realizing it is happening, the sensitivity does not go away, it gets refined. It becomes precise. It becomes selective in the most powerful way imaginable. What was once a flood becomes a current they can navigate. What was once noise becomes signal. What was once a source of suffering becomes the most accurate human detection system that exists on this earth. The same nervous system that made them feel broken at 20 becomes the exact instrument that makes them absolutely unreadable and untouchable at 40. There is something that happens to an empath after they have been crossed one too many times. After they have given everything and watched it get taken for granted. After they have opened their heart completely and had someone walk through it like it was nothing more than a corridor on the way to something else. After they have said yes when every single part of their body was screaming no because they did not want to disappoint, because they did not want to seem difficult, because somewhere deep inside they still believed that if they just gave a little more, loved a lie, tittle harder, stayed a little longer, things would change. And then one day, they do not break. They do not collapse. Something shifts instead. Something inside them becomes absolutely, permanently, irreversibly done. That moment is not anger. That moment is not resentment. That moment is the birth of a boundary that was forged in the kind of heat that most people will never experience in their entire lifetime. And a boundary that is built from that depth of personal experience is not a rule written in a self-help book. It is not something they read about on a weekend and decided to try. It is structural. It is architectural. It is built into the foundation of who they are at the cellular level because it cost them something real to build it. It cost them relationships. It cost them sleep. It cost them years of their life spent in situations that slowly drained everything they had. Young empaths have boundaries in theory. They know they should protect themselves. They have heard the West, frets. They understand the concept intellectually. But the knowing and the living are two entirely different universes. Because when you have not yet been burned enough times, when you have not yet felt the full weight of what it costs to abandon yourself repeatedly for the comfort of someone else, the boundary remains flexible. It bends. It negotiates. It makes exceptions for people who do not deserve exceptions. It whispers maybe this time will be different when all the evidence is pointing in the opposite direction. But the empath who has lived through enough cycles of giving and being emptied, who has watched the same pattern repeat itself wearing different faces and different names, who has finally connected the dots between their own self-abandonment and the pain that always followed that empath does not negotiate anymore. Their boundary does not bend. It does not apologize for existing. It does not shrink itself to make someone else comfortable. It stands exactly where it stands. P.S. Because every inch of it was paid for with lived experience that cannot be argued with, cannot be manipulated around, and cannot be moved by charm or pressure or guilt. Most people go through their entire lives reading the surface of other human beings. They hear the words being spoken, and they take those words at face value. They see the smile, and they believe the smile. They listen to the explanation, and they accept the explanation because there is no obvious reason not to. This is how the majority of people navigate the world through the information that is consciously and deliberately presented to them. And for most situations, this works well enough. But there is a category of human experience that lives entirely beneath that surface. There is a layer of reality that words were specifically chosen to hide, that smiles were carefully constructed to cover, that explanations were deliberately crafted to redirect attention away from. And the average person walks right past that LA. Every single day without ever knowing it existed. The empath does not walk past it. The empath has never been able to walk past it. From the very beginning of their life, they were picking up on things that nobody around them was talking about. The tension in a room that everyone else pretended was not there. The sadness behind someone's laughter that did not quite reach their eyes. The way a person's energy shifted the moment a certain topic entered the conversation. These were not things the empath was consciously analyzing. They were not sitting down with a checklist and running through behavioral indicators. It was arriving in them automatically, instantaneously, the way a seasoned musician hears a note slightly off-key before they can even consciously process what they heard. It was happening below the level of thought. And here is what decades of this kind of perception does to a human being. Every person the empath encountered became a lesson. Every relationship they moved through, healthy or toxic, loving or destructive, added thousands of new reference points to a subconscious library that never stops growing and never forgets a single entry. Every time they felt something was wrong before they could explain why, and then watched reality eventually confirm exactly what they felt, that experience deepened the trust in their own internal system and sharpened the accuracy of their perception by another degree. By the time an empath has lived 4 or 5 decades on this earth, that library is so vast, so detailed, so layered with real human experience across every kind of relationship and every kind of dynamic imaginable, that what they possess is no longer just sensitivity. It is something that operates at a neurological level that resembles what the world calls genius. They are not guessing about people. They are not making assumptions. They are running an internal pattern recognition process that has been trained by a lifetime of the most intimate and brawn. D. Precise human data collection that exists. No algorithm built in any laboratory can replicate what life itself has built inside them. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that only an empath knows. It is not the exhaustion that comes from physical labor or long hours or a demanding schedule. It is a deeper kind of tired. It is the exhaustion that comes from carrying other people's pain as if it were your own responsibility to fix it. From sitting across from someone who is suffering and feeling their suffering move through your own body like it belongs to you. From being the person that everyone calls when things fall apart, the person that everyone leans on when the weight gets too heavy, the person who somehow always has something left to give even when they themselves are running completely empty. This is the empath in their youth. This is the empath before life teaches them the most important lesson they will ever learn about the nature of their own gift. Because what the empath does not yet understand is the difference between feeling someone's pain and being obligated to dissolve into it. They have spent so long absorbing the emotional reality of everyone around them that they have confused empathy with responsibility. They believe that because they can feel what another person is carrying, it is their duty to carry it for them. They believe that their sensitivity is a calling to rescue, to fix, to heal, to stay. And so they give, endlessly, selflessly, completely. They pour themselves into broken people, into broken situations, into cycles that never resolve because the people inside them were never truly ready to change. And every time they pour, they walk away a little more hollow than they were before. But something extraordinary happens when the empath finally reaches the edge of that pattern and refuses to step back into it. When they have given enough times to enough people to understand with absolute clarity that their giving was not transforming anyone, it was simply being consumed. That realization does not make them cold. It does not close their heart or strip them of their compassion. It redirects everything. It takes that same enormous capacity for feeling, for understanding, for holding space, and it stops pointing it horizontally at individuals who drain it and begins pointing it vertically towards something much larger than any single relationship could ever contain. This is the moment the empath stops rescuing and starts leading. This is the moment their gift stops being a liability and becomes the most powerful engine of impact they have ever had access to. Because the same depth of feeling that made them absorb one person's pain can now move an entire room. The same capacity for understanding that they used to justify someone's harmful behavior can now be used to articulate truths that thousands of people have felt but never had the words for. The same energy that was being quietly consumed in private is now building something visible, something lasting, something that carries their fingerprint on every single layer of it because it was built from the most authentic and hard-earned emotional intelligence that exists inside a human being. The world has spent a very long time rewarding a particular kind of intelligence, the kind that can be measured in numbers, demonstrated in boardrooms, proven through credentials hanging on walls and titles printed on business cards, the kind that speaks loudly and moves fast and projects certainty even when certainty is not entirely warranted. This is the intelligence that gets celebrated in systems built by people who never learned to feel deeply, who were never forced by their own nature to sit inside the complexity of human emotion and find their way through it without a map. And for a long time, the empath looked at that world and felt like they did not belong in it, like their particular kind of knowing was too soft, too internal, too difficult to quantify to ever compete with the louder, faster, more visible forms of intelligence that seemed to dominate every space they entered. But the world is not static. And the older an empath gets, the more clearly they begin to see something that younger eyes cannot yet recognize. Every system, every organization, every relationship, every negotiation, every moment of conflict or collaboration or creation that exists between human beings, all of it runs on emotion underneath. All of it. The most rational business decision in the world was made by a human being whose emotional state shaped the lens through which they evaluated every single piece of data in front of them. The most logical argument ever constructed was received by a nervous system that was already emotionally primed to accept it or reject it before the first word was spoken. Emotion is not separate from the way the world operates. Emotion is the invisible architecture that the entire human world is built upon, and the empath. Fur, He who has spent decades developing their relationship with that invisible architecture does not just understand this intellectually, they feel it in real time. They walk into a negotiation, and they already know where the resistance lives before anyone has spoken a word of disagreement. They stand in front of an audience, and they feel exactly where the energy in the room is contracting and where it is opening, and they adjust in ways that no technique or training could ever fully teach. They sit across from a person in crisis, and they do not just hear what is being said, they feel what is being withheld, what is being protected, what that person needs to hear in order for something real to shift inside them. This is not a soft skill. This is not a secondary advantage that helps around the edges of real ability. This is the most sophisticated form of human intelligence that exists, and it cannot be downloaded, cannot be fast-tracked, cannot be performed by someone who is not genuinely mived inside their own emotional depth long enough to understand it completely. The empath at the height of their power does not walk into a room hoping to be accepted by it. They walk in and the room reorganizes itself around their presence because something in every person there recognizes, on a level beneath conscious thought, that they are in the presence of someone who understands the truth of what it means to be human more completely than almost anyone they have ever encountered.